Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Imagine, if you will, taking a simple wooden board game, a pastime that people have enjoyed in quiet parlors and cafes for centuries, and completely transforming it into a highly calibrated machine of state. Well, that's exactly the premise of the man we're looking at today, Mikhail Botvinnik. Actually, scratch that. He wasn't just a great player. He was the primary architect of the Soviet school of chess and, honestly, arguably the single most influential figure in the entire history of the sport. Today, we're going to explore how one man's uniquely brilliant mind reshaped an entire game, turning it from a romantic gamble into a rigorous, rock-solid science. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our structural blueprint for understanding his multifaceted legacy today. First, we'll cover chess as a state machine. Second, the scientist champion. Third, the Triple Crown. Fourth, the Botvinnik Chess School. And finally, we'll wrap up with his years as a computer pioneer. Section 1. Chess as a state machine. To truly get Botvinnik, we first have to step back onto the 20th century geopolitical stage. You see, back then in the Soviet Union, what happened on those 64 squares was treated as way more than a mere hobby. Chess was literally a geopolitical weapon. It was used by the state as a highly visible strategic tool to demonstrate intellectual and cultural dominance on the world stage. Think of it as a proxy for the Cold War, just played out with knights and pawns. And Mikhail Botvinnik? He was the mastermind champion who fully recognized this reality. He took this political mandate and turned it into an exact, replicable science. And this brilliantly illustrates how he was the very first player to treat chess as a rigorous, disciplined profession rather than a romantic gamble. He broke the whole thing down into 3 core pillars. First up, physical training. Because, let's face it, you just can't think clearly in hour 6 of a grueling match if your body is completely exhausted. Second was psychological preparation, understanding your opponent's mind just as well as your own. And third, deep analytical study. He prepared these incredibly complex opening variations and endgame strategies far away from the tournament hall. Section 2, the scientist champion. So you may be wondering, where did this incredibly methodical approach actually come from? Well, Botvinnik's unique edge came from entirely outside the chessboard. He basically lived a dual life. On one hand, you had the chess champion completely dominating the Soviet scene in the 1930s, repeatedly crushing the intuitive, artistic players of his era. But on the other hand, he was an electrical engineer maintaining a high-level, full-time career in Soviet energy research. And the crazy part, he didn't keep these two lives separate. He took the systematic, problem-solving mindset of a literal engineer and applied it directly to his chess play. His entire philosophy can really be summarized by this quote. Unlike the romantic gamblers of the past, Botvinnik approached chess as a scientist, a soldier, and an engineer. That's absolutely crucial to understanding him. It was a ruthless, deeply methodical approach. If chess was a war, he definitely wasn't going to rely on some lucky cavalry charge, right? He was going to win through superior logistics, impenetrable defense, and absolute scientific certainty. He systematically removed chaotic intuition from his game. Section 3, the Triple Crown. So the crucial point is this number right here, 3. Mikhail Botvinnik is a 3-time world champion. But what makes his legacy so incredibly unique is how he got that number. He achieved the incredibly rare feat of holding the world title, losing it, and then coming back to regain it, not just once, but twice. No one does that. It showed this unparalleled level of resilience and an ability to retreat to his laboratory, objectively analyze his defeats, and return stronger. When he was actually at the board, his style was usually described with one terrifying word: immovable. He was the absolute master of the endgame and what chess players call the positional squeeze. When opponents sat down across from Botvinnik, they weren't usually beaten by sudden flashy tactical traps. Instead, they were just slowly suffocated by his perfect logical blueprints. It was honestly like watching a boa constrictor. Every single move just tightened his grip on the position until his opponent simply had no room left to breathe. And this sets up one of the greatest rivalries in the history of the sport. On one side, you have Botvinnik, the cold, analytical, and scientific champion relying on that immovable framework. On the other side, Mikhail Tal, famously known as the magician from Riga. Tal was literally everything Botvinnik wasn't. He was wild, chaotic, deeply intuitive, and highly artistic. Their legendary clashes, especially their 1960 match, weren't just games of chess. They represented this massive ideological tension between pure calculated science and unbridled chaotic genius. Section 4, the Botvinnik Chess School. Of course, even titans eventually have to step away from the board. When he retired from competitive play, he transitioned into the ultimate teacher, becoming known universally as the Patriarch. Now, historically, he's often described as an intensely private person and a remarkably strict disciplinarian. Some even called his personality cold and demanding. But we have to understand, this wasn't arbitrary cruelty. He simply demanded absolute perfection. That same cold scientific rigor he required of himself during his playing days, he now fiercely demanded it from every single one of his students. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the direct pipeline of legendary minds he personally forged. Look at these names: Anatoly Karpov, Garry Kasparov, Vladimir Kramnik. These aren't just grandmasters. These are three of the greatest world champions to ever touch a chess piece. Botvinnik literally built them in his school, passing down his exact analytical framework to the next generation of giants. And because of that pipeline, we arrive at this staggering number: 50. Through his own championship reigns and the legendary students he trained, Botvinnik essentially engineered an unprecedented 50 years of USSR dominance in world chess. Think about that for a second. Half a century where the framework he designed ruled the globe. To put that into perspective, it's like a single sports coach designing the playbook that wins every single world championship for the next 50 years. It's just wild! Section 5. The Computer Polymorph. Let's move to and see how this builds in the final, futuristic chapter of his life. His mind just couldn't rest on human achievements alone. In the 1930s, as we saw, he systematized chess as an electrical engineer. But by the 1960s, he became absolutely fascinated by the emerging field of artificial intelligence. In his later years, he dedicated his time to attempting to program a computer to actually think like a grandmaster, to replicate the positional intuition he had spent a lifetime perfecting. He was a true visionary, actively working to bridge the wooden board with the Silicon Age long before modern chess engines were even a reality. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question to ponder. Did Botvinnik successfully bridge the gap between the wooden board and the Silicon Age? While his specific algorithms might not be what powers today's supercomputers, the very fact that the greatest human mind in chess saw AI as the logical next step tells us absolutely everything about his genius. It really makes you wonder, if the Patriarch of Soviet Chess were alive today to see modern AI, what blueprints would he be designing next? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.